Have you ever heard of the Central African Republic? I had to look it up on a map, I'm sorry. But the Central African Republic decided to adopt Bitcoin. Now, a lot of the African nations have a challenge with what they call the unbanked. Okay? And part of the challenge with the Central African Republic is simply that when they decided to adopt Bitcoin as their national currency, they have a currency now that is struggling, that is having its own challenges, of course, being undervalued and taken, between different countries. So they were hoping that Bitcoin could help them to have a good, stable currency. Well, of course, there's a lot of detractors to Bitcoin. People who literally do not want Bitcoin to become a commonly accepted currency among a lot of people. And that is simply because it threatens the fiat currencies. It threatens the control that central banks have over their own currencies. So Central African Republic says, hey, we've got to solve a problem here. We have an unbanked situation. They have a problem just getting the internet to their people. So that creates its own challenges anyway, because you have to be able to contact the internet in order to have a wallet and contact the Bitcoin network to be able to do transactions back and forth. To have a wallet and do business, you have to have the internet. So you have to have a cell phone at least. Well, cell phones are a lot easier to install than bank machines, than banks in particular. A bank might not have the desire to put a bank in an area where a lot of people are very, very poor. I mean, there's just not enough business there for a bank to put a physical entity there and service customers. So how do you service customers like that without having a facility? Well, if your facility is as simple as people having a cell phone and cell towers, then you've got a situation where they can do self-banking. And so Bitcoin becomes appealing at that level. And so the Central African Republic decided then to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. So the whole reason why they did so might be a little less easy to understand than that. But understand that the decision to adopt by a third world country is not one that can be taken lightly, because the World Bank does not like Bitcoin. And a lot of times the World Bank has come to these countries and said, if you accept Bitcoin, we'll just cut you off from any, facilitating any loans between you and other countries. And that tends to slow the progression of Bitcoin down. Well, frankly, it's hard to get a loan in Bitcoin. There aren't a whole lot of facilities, although the decentralized finance is creating opportunities to do so. It's not as prevalent quite yet, and so it's a bit of a challenge. So it says the Bitcoin announcement left many scratching their heads, and some wondering if it had more to do with the political shift away from France and towards Russia. Now, this is an article that came out before the Ukraine issue, so I'm not quite sure what the ramifications of the political challenges that Russia is having geopolitically, but they probably wanted to get away from France, who was the original colonizer of the area that is now known as the Central African Republic. So it's, might be a little politically motivated there. 9 out of 10 Central Africans do not have access to the internet. So that might create some bit of challenges. But they're tipping their toes into it. Many people will still use the currency that they currently have simply because they can put it in their pocket and they can walk with it and go to the store. Those that are probably a little bit more sophisticated, have accumulated more wealth and abilities, live in the major towns and not out in the bushes or not out in the small towns, would probably adopt Bitcoin a lot easier. Now, the first country to adopt Bitcoin, though, was El Salvador. And El Salvador has had this going now for over 8 months. And so in El Salvador, there's a lot of detractors. In fact, as I was searching for information showing the experiences that people have had, I found an article that shows some of the positives that are going on in El Salvador. There were probably 10 articles for every one positive, 10 negative articles for every one positive. Part of the challenge was, of course, that Bitcoin took a dump in value over the last 8 months. It was riding high at about 60,000. Now it's at 30. And that tends to put a damper on some of the things that El Salvador wanted to accomplish. But the leader of El Salvador instead is saying, hey, it's 30,000 now. It's half price. I can go buy more. And he's putting more of their national currency into Bitcoin and pulling the Bitcoin in there and helping people to adopt and to get the country's wallets and to start trading back and forth. Now, some vendors, I did read in a couple of the other articles, some vendors, started taking Bitcoin transactions and then backed off. Now, part of the challenge is that the alternate currency in El Salvador is the US dollar. So El Salvador, their national currency was the US dollar for many, many years and has been. So they're moving from the US dollar, which is a fairly stable currency, at least until the last 6 months or so. But it's a relatively stable currency. And in fact, it's considered the world's gold standard as far as fiat currencies go. Other countries will buy the dollar because it is so stable and use that as something to stabilize their own currencies if they have a second currency, or they just adopt the dollar. So El Salvador is going away from the dollar, and other El Salvadorans who are a little bit challenged with the idea of Bitcoin and the potential for the flexibility, the ups and downs that Bitcoin has. Some call it volatility, and probably rightly so, will tend to say, well, let's just take cash and see how this thing works out. And so a lot of vendors tend to do that. So when they announced, that was about 8 months ago, you can see that there are several. It says Bitcoin for the 100 is a collection of stories. It's a book. And you can go buy this. It's a collection of 100 stories that talk about how Bitcoin has been of benefit. And really, part of that benefit is just the ability of people who have cell phones but don't have banks close by to be able to do banking, to be able to get into decentralized finance places and be able to get loans for different products and for advancement in business. And so these stories are starting to build up, that there's a very positive momentum that Bitcoin is creating within the country. So Don has seen firsthand how Bitcoin can change the lives of his community with new opportunities. It says, Bitcoin has brought us great opportunities, especially the positive impact it's had on the San Rafael Casajera Canton School Center. Okay, that's a school. The students and teachers of the school had a hard time getting to and from school because of its location on the island. Because of generous donations, they don't need to worry, and now about how they'll get to school anymore. Built with the Bitcoin Foundation and Bitcoin Magazine, they donated a boat to the community to make it more accessible. There's a coastline area called the Bitcoin Coast, and it is a mecca for Bitcoin developers and Bitcoin enthusiasts to gather and to work and to push the development of Bitcoin. So they've been involved with Bitcoin in El Salvador for many years already. And it was just kind of a matter of course that they would eventually adopt Bitcoin on their own. So many people have been able to be positively benefited by it. And this article is a really good one that tells that. So there are adoptions going on, and the Bitcoin revolution is really moving forward despite the negatives that you see in the newspapers. There's a lot of naysayers out there who want to point at this problem or that problem, and they want to pick it apart. But what I noticed as I was reading those articles is there were a lot of innuendo and very little fact. Every time they said this would happen, it's always a may happen or might happen, or they may have lost this much when the Bitcoin devalued. Okay, fine. They may have. Tell me some hard fact here. And the problem is, if you read those negative articles, read between the lines and realize that a lot of those articles are just FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and not much substance. So, do we have any other questions? How does Ukraine having a digital currency relate to the war with Russia? That is a very good question, because what it allowed, with them having a digital currency, it allowed them to receive other digital currencies very quickly and quickly exchange it for their digital currency. In other words, it allowed people like you and me, if we wanted to help them out financially, we could send donations to them and they could very readily exchange it into. You don't have a whole ton of intermediaries, like this charity takes the money and you have to trust that this charity is actually going to send the money to those people in need in Ukraine. Well, there were digital wallets set up to where the money could be sent directly to them. So hope you've enjoyed this particular segment, and I hope you'll help me by hitting the subscribe button and growing the channel. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next subject.